There is one leadership skill that matters more than any other skill, and that is the skill of emotional regulation. Emotional regulation means no matter how difficult or frustrating or challenging something is, you do not waver in the level of commitment, determination, and excellence that you bring to the work you do. When you can lead powerfully, even through obstacles and struggles, your reputation and your impact both grow exponentially, and that is what we're learning to do in today's episode. Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's episode is for you if you want to deepen your leadership skills, feel more well-rounded and confident as a leader, and if you really want to feel prepared to move into that next big leadership position. So today's episode is part 2 of my Leadership Skills 101 series, where I've been teaching you the foundational skills that will help you thrive in bigger, higher impact leadership roles. So last week, I released part 1 of this episode series, where I taught you the 4 buckets of leadership skills. So I'll quickly review what they are. But if you want the deeper dive, definitely listen to last week's episode. The 4 buckets of leadership skills are execution skills, communication skills, people leadership skills, and emotional regulation skills. Now, in last week's episode, I covered the first 3 buckets of skills: execution, communication, and people leadership. And in today's episode, I'm going to cover the 4th skill on that list, which is emotional regulation. And the reason that I'm doing it in a part 2 in a separate episode is because it is such a big and important topic. I didn't think that I could do it justice unless it had an entire episode just dedicated to deep diving into it. Now, in my opinion, of these 4 buckets of skills, execution, communication, people leadership, and emotional regulation, I personally believe that emotional regulation is the most important, most needle-moving skill that you can develop if you want to have a bigger impact, if you want to be able to handle a bigger, broader scope in your role, if you want to feel more confident and stable inside. All of the successful outcomes that I am so often supporting my clients with map back to emotional regulation. And I'm going to, of course, teach you all about what it is in today's episode. But what I do want to say that I think is so important is not only is it the most important of the 4 buckets of skills, but it's the least talked about in corporate. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today, these topics, for me at least, when I was in my corporate career, this stuff wasn't talked about. This topic really only became a part of my vocabulary when I became a coach and I started to work with my clients on their deeper process of internal transformation. And I started helping my clients grow their confidence, have an unstoppable mindset, be more emotionally resilient. As I did those things more and more, and those are just such a big part of the coaching that I do today, this topic has become front and center for me as a coach, but interestingly, it's not always front and center in a corporate environment. And so I really wanted to make sure to shine a light on it because it doesn't always get the attention that it deserves. So what I'm going to do in today's episode is I'm going to, number 1, define what is an emotion, super foundational, but actually very important. Number 2, I'm going to define what is emotional regulation and also what is not emotional regulation, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about this topic. And then I'm going to talk about some of the barriers that get in the way of getting good at this and how you can shift your thinking and your relationship with yourself to get better at it. And like I said, as you get better at it, you will be able to accomplish so much more. You'll be less scared of stepping into bigger things because you'll know that you have the internal emotional fortitude to handle bigger challenges. By the way, I haven't introduced myself. If you're new here, I'm Jess. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I'm the host of this podcast. The Art of Speaking Up is a New York Times featured podcast, and I'm also a prior corporate executive who really struggled with self-confidence on my journey to becoming a successful corporate executive. And this show is all about giving you the tools and advice and encouragement that I wish I had earlier in my career. And with that, let's talk about the definition of what an emotion is. Once we define what an emotion is, it will be then easier for us to talk about what emotional regulation is. Now, for all these definitions, I'm just using my personal definitions, the ideas and principles that I come back to as a coach. Because like I mentioned, when I'm supporting my clients, primarily in my group program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy, not only am I teaching them tactical skills, but I'm working with them on their internal self-confidence and that deeper psychological change. So these are all ideas that come up in my coaching work quite a bit. So what is an emotion? An emotion is a shift in our internal state. So the way that I think about it is you can almost imagine yourself just kind of sitting on a park bench, not really feeling anything, just feeling totally neutral. And an emotion is the internal experience that you start to have when something around you shifts the psychological state that you're experiencing. So you might be sitting on a park bench and an adorable husky runs up to you with a big smile on his cute little husky face. And all of a sudden you go from neutral to now experiencing the emotion of happiness or joy. Or maybe you're sitting on the park bench and you hear a fire truck siren on the street. And then all of a sudden you start to feel anxious or stressed. An emotion is an internal state that we experience, sometimes in response to something happening around us. Sometimes it's in response just to our own thoughts. So you could just be sitting on that park bench and there could be like nothing around you, but maybe you'll have a memory from your childhood that makes you feel sad or happy. But it's just that change in your internal state. And it is normal for humans to experience emotions. And I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I do feel like I have to say this because I think that there are a lot of weird elements of corporate culture that don't really acknowledge that we are humans who experience emotions and that this is normal. I feel like a lot of corporate culture sometimes wants to force us to be more robotic. And I just want to be really clear that experiencing emotions is a normal and healthy part of the human experience. This includes both positive emotions that feel good and harder emotions that don't feel so good inside. There's a bit of a cultural narrative that to be a psychologically healthy person means to not feel intensely, especially to not feel negative emotions intensely. And I just want to clarify that experiencing emotions is psychologically healthy. And I would argue not experiencing emotions is not psychologically healthy. And only experiencing positive emotions is also not psychologically healthy. It is normal as a human to experience a wide range of emotions, some that feel good, some that don't feel good. I want to establish that as a foundation because it can be really hard to grow and build genuine confidence and become a really wonderful leader if you are thinking that being a great leader means that you don't feel difficult feelings. Now, I'm going to talk more about that as we get deeper into the episode, but I now want to pivot into the question of what is emotional regulation. So my definition of emotional regulation is that I can be experiencing an emotion, and regardless of how difficult or challenging that emotion might be, I can still show up as the leader that I want to be. So I can take the actions that represent my strongest leadership. I can communicate in a way that represents my strongest leadership. The emotions that I'm feeling don't cause me to behave or communicate in a way that isn't my strongest way of showing up. Another way to think about it is I can show up strong and show up as the person who I want to be, even if I'm experiencing an emotion that is making it really difficult for me to do so. Now, emotional regulation does not mean never feeling emotions. So I want to distinguish between the idea of not feeling any emotions, which is not what emotional regulation is, versus feeling emotions but having autonomy and choice over your behavior. Those are two different things. And a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking that a good leader doesn't feel emotions, and that the goal is not to feel anxious, not to feel overwhelmed, not to feel angry, not to feel frustrated. I see so many people thinking that that's what good leadership is I don't feel all these heavy, difficult feelings. And what I want to offer is that good leadership is the opposite of that. Good leadership is I feel these heavy, difficult feelings sometimes because I'm human, and that's literally what it means to be human. And this is how the world works. But those difficult feelings don't prevent me from showing up in the way that I want to. And what I want to point out is that if we make our goal the goal of I don't want to ever feel those negative feelings, then we never develop the capacity to handle those feelings. We become fragile. If we spend our entire focus shoving down our feelings, we don't learn how to handle them. We don't learn how to navigate them. And so when they come up, which they inevitably will because we're human, we're not going to have the tools to move through them in an effective way. This is why it's so important to not glorify the idea of always feeling positively or never struggling with negative, difficult feelings. If we glorify that as the goal, then we miss out on the opportunity to become flexible and resilient in the face of difficult feelings, which is ultimately, I would argue, the most important thing that we need from a leader. So emotional regulation just means that I could be experiencing a difficult emotion and it's not going to detract from my effectiveness as a leader. Now, to make this a little bit more specific, it'll be helpful for me to share a couple examples with you of challenging emotions and what it looks like to be able to practice emotional regulation versus not. So a really good example of a challenging emotion is anger. Now, for you, you might experience anger as pure anger. Maybe you experience it as frustration. Maybe you experience it as rage. But someone does something or says something, and all of a sudden you feel fiery hot and you don't like what they're saying, and it's really activating, and you're starting to feel angry. Emotional regulation means even though I feel angry, I'm not going to yell at this person. I'm not going to be passive aggressive to this person. I'm not going to stop trying to collaborate with this person. I'm not going to allow the emotion of anger to skew my effectiveness in communicating with this stakeholder. If I'm able to practice emotional regulation, I can still be effective in the meeting or in the conversation, even though someone said something that made me angry. Now, the reason that emotional regulation is so important as you elevate into leadership is because the bigger scope you have, the bigger responsibility you have, the bigger the upswings and the downswings in your role will be. And when I say upswings and downswings, I mean upswings and downswings both in your successes. You'll achieve bigger successes on a bigger scale, but you'll also face bigger obstacles and bigger failures on a bigger scale. So the swings of the successes and the swings of the failures, those will both be bigger and wider. And as a result, the emotional swings will also be bigger and wider. So you'll experience a big success and you'll feel big excitement and big joy, but you'll then encounter a big, very challenging obstacle and you might experience big frustration or big overwhelm. So I want you to think about it as the bigger the role, the bigger the wins and the bigger the challenges. The bigger the wins and the bigger the challenges, the bigger the emotions that go with those wins and challenges. And what we need our leaders to do is we need our leaders to be able to move through those big challenges, even if those big challenges are eliciting big, difficult, uncomfortable emotions. This is why emotional regulation is the most important thing. And I often will tell my clients this, and it actually came up in one of my group sessions a couple weeks ago, but it's this idea that at a certain level, your skills are going to plateau. You're going to know everything there is to know about your function, and you're going to have all the knowledge. And then your value add as a leader is going to start to come from your ability to weather the emotional ups and downs, as opposed to coming from your ability to just have intellectual knowledge. So it's your emotional regulation that helps differentiate you and helps you add more value. And this makes a lot of sense. If being effective as a leader was just about knowledge gathering, all we would have to do is gather all the knowledge, and we'd be super effective, and we would just be more and more effective. The more we learned, the better we'd be at our roles. But that's not how it works. It's not like a one-to-one thing where the more I learn, the better I get at my role. It's more like I learn, and that's going to get me up to a certain point, and then I'm going to plateau. And then the next growth, like that next level of growth, isn't going to come from intellectual learning. It's going to come from my ability to handle these more challenging emotions. And so emotional regulation tends to become more important as you get deeper into your career. And a lot of times when we're feeling unstable emotionally and we're struggling with the emotions, we think that we need more knowledge, and we think it's because we're missing knowledge. And I think what we don't realize is that as you're moved into a leadership role, they're not moving you in that role with the expectation that you know everything. They're moving you into the role with the expectation that you don't know everything, but that you can handle the emotional ups and downs involved in that. And a lot of people get really stuck because they get promoted into a leadership role and it feels emotionally intense. It feels really difficult. And they think to themselves, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I'm missing all this information. And I just don't know enough to feel confident in this role. And it's like, no. As you get into these higher roles, you'll never know all the stuff. That's the whole reason you're in the role. Your company needs someone who can handle things that are highly ambiguous and new and unfamiliar, and who knows how to not get knocked down by the emotional experience of that, because that can be really difficult. So next time you feel an impulse to learn more, or you feel like you need to know more, just ask yourself, is my value in this role or in this meeting or in this conversation coming from my knowledge and how much I know or bring? Or is it coming from the fact that I can add value even when I don't have the knowledge? When you get really good at answering that question accurately, you will become so good at your job. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about how to get better at emotional regulation and what sometimes gets in the way of it. Hey, Jess, do you have a pair of sunglasses I can borrow? The sun is so bright that it's hurting my eyes. Oh, it's not the sun that's super bright. What do you mean it's not the sun? It's me. I'm glowing. That's why it's hurting your eyes. Why are you glowing? Well, I just took a free online course and it made me feel so confident I started to glow. What was it called? It's called CEO Vibes. What's it about? It's all about how you don't need to be perfect or have all the answers to bring that confident CEO energy into the room. It made me realize that I totally already have everything it takes to impress people, and then I started glowing. What? Where can I get this course? It lives inside the free resource library, which you can access at jessguzzittcoaching.com/free resources or by clicking the link in the show notes. Hey, did you still need those sunglasses? I've got a pair right here. Nah, I don't want to wear them because I want to take the free course and see if it makes me glow too. I'll catch you later. Bye. Welcome back to the episode. Okay, so to very quickly recap what we've covered so far, I shared this idea that as you advance and elevate into bigger levels of leadership, your wins are bigger. And the obstacles that you encounter are also bigger, which means that the emotions that you experience, both positive and negative, those emotions are also going to be bigger because you're going to experience those emotions in response to the big successes and big obstacles that you're encountering as a leader. And this is why emotional regulation is so important, because as a leader, what your team and your organization needs from you is your ability to show up consistently, to communicate consistently, to execute consistently, to move things forward consistently, even in the face of big obstacles and even in the face of the big, difficult emotions that those obstacles bring up within you. I like to think of emotional regulation as a skill or a muscle that we have to grow so that we can step into new levels of greatness, so that we can take up space in even bigger ways, because stepping into something bigger, taking up more space, is going to mean deeper challenges. But when we get really good at navigating difficult emotions, those challenges become something that we can handle. And I get so excited sharing that with you, because that's probably one of my absolute favorite things about personal growth. And one of my absolute favorite things about the coaching that I do is that all of the work that I do, or not all, but like so much of the work that I do as a coach, is to help someone learn to navigate an experience that used to be too difficult for them, that used to elicit emotions that were so uncomfortable or so overwhelming that they felt like they couldn't handle that experience, and to help them become stronger internally and bigger internally so that those situations don't feel so big, so that the situations start to feel smaller and more manageable. The way that I think about it is when we become really strong and big inside, then these challenging situations that used to feel so big start to feel smaller. And that's really when we can achieve levels of success that we weren't able to achieve before. And I'm sure that you can think of an example from somewhere in your life where there was something that used to feel big and hard and overwhelming to a past version of you. And that circumstance, that thing that used to feel hard, hasn't changed, but you've changed. And because you've changed, that situation no longer feels so big. This is the magic of personal growth. I just love it. I love experiencing it for myself. I love it when my clients experience it. It's truly one of the most gratifying things. So now what I want to get into in the episode is I want to share 5 different ways you can get better at emotional regulation. So 5 different ways you can get better at executing with excellence, being an effective leader, communicating effectively, even when you are faced with obstacles that elicit difficult emotions. So let's get into them. The first one, this is extremely basic, but for a lot of us, a past version of myself included, there's a huge opportunity for growth in this one. So the first one is to cultivate a deeper awareness of the emotions that you're experiencing internally. Everything that I'm sharing in today's episode is kind of based on this assumption or premise that we're always aware of the emotions that we're feeling. And actually, that's not always the case. Sometimes we don't even realize what emotion we are feeling until it is too late, until that emotion has driven us to take an action that we regret. Only then do we become aware of the intense emotion that we were feeling, because having taken an action that we regret and having created some sort of consequence that we wish wasn't there, we then kind of look back in hindsight and ask ourselves, what happened? Why did I do that? Why did I take that action? And then what we uncover is, oh, I was feeling super stressed. I was feeling super angry. I was feeling super anxious, and that's why I did that. But in the moment, I wasn't able to identify and name what I was feeling. I didn't slow down enough to notice, oh my gosh, I'm super stressed. Oh my gosh, I'm super angry. And if we do slow down to notice what we are feeling emotionally, that creates a new moment in time where we can make a choice about our action and about how we behave. But if we're not aware of how we're feeling emotionally, then it's very, very difficult for us to then make choices about the action that we'll take. And it's so wild. Like, it kind of sounds inaccurate to think of the fact that we could be feeling a really difficult emotion and not even be aware of it. But sometimes the emotion itself is so intense that it moves us quickly into action before we even have a chance to notice what we're feeling. So simply getting better at identifying your emotions, which can just be done through practice. And it is something that's really difficult. I have a coach that I work with. I've been working with this person for a very long time. And I remember like my first year or more of the coaching work was me learning to understand and be aware of what I was feeling because I was so disconnected from my own emotions. But it is something that we can get better at with practice. And even though it's kind of not the most fun thing, because who wants to become more deeply aware of their emotions, when we're feeling an unpleasant emotion? It's like, why would I want deeper awareness of something that doesn't feel good? But the problem is, if we're not aware of the emotion, we often then adopt behaviors or take actions that are driven by that emotion that we end up regretting later. So our ability to be with the emotion, to be aware of it, to feel it, to tolerate it, can actually prevent us from making choices that we end up regretting. Okay, so that's the first one on the list, which is deeper awareness of what you're feeling internally. The second way that you can get better at emotional regulation, and this is so important, this comes up in my client work so often, and this is such a hard one, but it's so important. The second one is getting better at not judging yourself when you are experiencing a difficult or intense emotion. A lot of times when we're feeling an uncomfortable or negative emotion and it's feeling really uncomfortable and big and intense inside us, we sometimes then take that experience and we say to ourselves, wow, this feels so bad and so big. Something must be wrong with me. Like, something must be wrong with me to feel this way because this is so intense. I don't see anyone else feeling this way. Something must be wrong with me. And we start to judge ourselves and we start to be really mean to ourselves because we're having this human experience of an uncomfortable emotion. And one thing that I want to share with you, and I hope you can take my word for this because I think it's hard to believe this unless you see it with your own two eyes. But one thing that I just want you to try to open your mind to is that while the people around you in your workplace might look really calm and might look like they're not experiencing any of the intense emotions that you're experiencing, I know for sure that is not true. There is so much happening for people beneath the surface that we aren't always seeing. And when we're really struggling or we're feeling a really big, uncomfortable emotion, it is so easy to assume that we are the only one and that something is wrong with us, simply because when we look at the people around us outside in, we aren't necessarily exposed to their full emotional and psychological landscape. We're only exposed to the parts of it that they want us to see. And they want us to see the parts of themselves that are calm and stable. So we're going to get a skewed perspective of other people's emotional state, especially in the workplace where it's not okay and it's a bit taboo to experience intense emotions. And so we're going to think something is wrong with us then for being less calm and feeling less emotionally stable and grounded internally. But what I want to share with you is that I've been coaching professionals for 4 years. I've had private, intimate conversations, both in groups and in one-on-one sessions. And I can tell you that there is so much happening for so many of us beneath the surface And it's really, really helpful to notice if you ever have a thought, something is wrong with me, this is only me, why is this so hard for me? Why is this so intense for me? If you could just practice offering yourself a little bit of grace, a little bit of understanding, and just say to yourself, it's okay that I'm feeling this. I haven't done anything wrong. This isn't a sign that I'm bad or something is wrong with me. Because when you learn to do that, when you learn to just be with the emotion without being super mean or intensely judgmental towards yourself, it's much easier then to re-find your center and then to make conscious choices about how you want to move forward. Because often when we're judging ourselves for experiencing an uncomfortable emotion, what happens, and a lot of this happens really fast and really automatically, but what happens is we think, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me for feeling this emotion. I need to make it go away as fast as possible so I can stop having this uncomfortable experience of feeling like something is wrong with me. And that's when we might take like this quick impulsive action that we regret because we're frantically trying to make this emotion go away so that we can stop being in this experience of feeling like something is wrong with us. But if we can be with a difficult emotion and also extend grace and understanding towards ourselves and not interpret that emotion as feeling like something is wrong with us, just be able to acknowledge that it's normal to feel difficult emotions, that can sometimes get us out of that frantic energy of like, I need to make this feeling go away immediately. So that's the second item on the list, which is just getting better at not judging yourself when you're experiencing a difficult emotion. As humans, we are emotional creatures. We all experience difficult emotions. We all have intense emotional experiences. I just see it as a fact of human life. And I think the faster that we can make peace with that and stop trying to like be a robot who doesn't have these kinds of experiences, the faster that we move towards happiness and stability and confidence, and I think the easier it is to create success. Okay, so the next item on the list is related. Number 3 is getting better at not judging other people when we experience a difficult emotion. So number 2 is getting better at not judging yourself when you're experiencing a difficult emotion. Number 3 is getting better at not judging other people when we experience a difficult emotion. So for example, let's say someone says something that makes you feel angry. Sometimes the default thought that we have is, oh, this person is so stupid. What's wrong with this person? Why are they doing that? And that sometimes makes it difficult for us to lead and problem solve effectively. And this is a tricky one because it can be really, really difficult to be in a situation where someone is kind of pressing your buttons or making you feel angry, but you have to think about your role in the room and what it is you're there to do. Your role in the room is to lead, to get things done, and to have an impact. So you have to think about when someone says something that makes me angry, what is my best path forward if I am determined to lead, get things done, and make an impact? Probably getting super judgy about that person isn't going to help me with that. What I really need to do is try to adopt more of a neutral perspective on the challenge that this person is bringing so I can go ahead and solve it. Now, this is something that I share with my clients often, so I'll share it with you here. This comes up so much in the Art of Speaking Up Academy, which is that in a professional context, the way that you interact with and think about the other stakeholder is going to be different than the way that you do that in a private or personal context. So what I mean by that is I'm telling you in this episode to try not to judge the other person so that you can effectively collaborate and lead and problem solve. But that doesn't mean you might not have all kinds of intense feelings about that person and that you shouldn't get to feel those feelings and express those feelings. It's just that the work situation, the work meeting, the work conversation, that's not the optimal place for you to really indulge those feelings if making an impact and building a reputation as an effective leader is super important to you. Because if you want that reputation as a really powerful leader, You have to be the person who can keep things moving forward, even when there's a very, very difficult stakeholder in the room. However, one of the things that good leaders do, and something that helps with emotional regulation, is to say, okay, in this work meeting, in this conversation, I'm going to try not to judge the other person. I'm going to try not to get carried away by my anger, and I'm just going to try to solve this problem that's coming up. But when I'm in private with my best friend, or when I'm in private with my coach, or when I'm in private with my mentorship community, or wherever I go that is not a professional environment where I have a different sort of support system, more of a personal support system, I'm going to share all my feelings. I'm going to express all my frustration. Maybe I need to trash talk this person for just a little bit. It is healthy for us to move our experiences through us, to talk about them, to process them. So I just want to make sure to share that distinction, which is that when you're in a professional setting, emotional regulation looks like, okay, this person is annoying me, but I'm not going to judge them. I'm going to stay present and grounded, and I'm going to help us solve this problem. But emotional regulation in a private or personal setting might look like I'm so angry and I'm so annoyed and I just need to vent and I just need to get it out. And to me, this is a sign of emotional maturity, the ability to give ourselves space in the appropriate space, the appropriate context to move through some of our darker thoughts and emotions that we experience. It's normal to judge another person. It's normal to be annoyed by another person. These are normal human feelings. Emotional regulation is not about not having those thoughts and feelings, but it's about processing them in a way that supports you and your goals. So if you take all of those judgy thoughts about that person and you let those thoughts impact how you interact with them at work, that's going to have an adverse impact on your professional path. But if you have a difficult experience with a stakeholder and you're able to not judge them in the moment and stay more neutral, and then you go to your coach, your therapist, your mentor, your community, your best friend at the end of the workday, and you say, oh my God, I need to talk to you about this, that also is going to support you in achieving the growth you want because you're preserving your reputation as a leader while also getting some of your emotional needs met. And it's so important for me to emphasize that it is normal for us to have negative, dark, judgy thoughts about other people. This is a normal part of the human experience, and we don't want to shove it down and pretend like it's not there, but we just don't want it to be coming out in a professional setting. So we want to allow ourselves to feel it and be with it in a private setting, a place where it is appropriate to do that. And actually, by having a place where you can feel it and you can get into some of your darker thoughts and feelings, maybe about another person, that's what helps you not explode and lash out at them in a professional setting. So by having the right space to process what you are feeling, that's what helps you not get overwhelmed by your feelings when you're in that professional situation. So I hope I explained that clearly. I hope I did that justice, because what I really didn't want to do in this episode is give you a sort of toxic positivity message of if a coworker is making you angry, just don't judge them, just show up and be neutral and solve the problem. It's more nuanced than that, right? It's if a coworker is making you angry, make sure to differentiate and know, okay, this is a professional environment. My goal here is to find neutrality. And then when I'm in a private or personal environment, my goal is going to be to tend to my emotions and metabolize some of my emotions. Okay, the next thing on the list, number 4. Oh, this is such a good one. The fourth thing that you can do to get better at emotional regulation is to have clearly defined leadership standards. So when I say clearly defined leadership standards, what I mean is you have a set of standards for how you show up as a leader. You have standards for how you contribute in meetings, how often you contribute in meetings, how you engage with stakeholders, how you respond to problems and disagreements that arise in the room. You can think about it as for any situation that you're in, a meeting, a disagreement, a discussion, whatever the situation is, you have a clearly defined standard of what does good leadership look like and how do I want to show up in this situation? And I love the word standards because a standard means that it's something that we uphold no matter the circumstance. So if you have a standard that no matter the circumstance, when you're in the room, you are always problem solving and you are always helping to move towards a solution, and that's your standard, then if someone makes you really, really angry and part of you wants to stop trying to solve it and stop trying to collaborate and just run out of the room and be like, oh my God, you're driving me crazy. I can't deal with this anymore. If you have a standard of I am always a problem solver, I am always a leader, then you know what emotional regulation looks like for you in that situation. You know that my standard is I show up and I get it across the finish line no matter what. So something that could be really useful for you to help you with this is to define your own leadership standards. Ask yourself, how do I want to behave and communicate in all of these different contexts at work? And it's also really helpful to ask yourself, if things get challenging in the room, like if a conflict comes up or things get tense or I start to get frustrated, what is my standard then for how I proceed? And a good way to find your answer to that is to ask yourself, like, what do I want to be known for? When people are talking about me by the water cooler, if that's even a thing anymore, I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but when people are talking about me and I'm not there, and then they say, oh my gosh, whenever conflict comes up, she is so blank. What do I want them to say about me? So when I was in corporate, what I wanted people to say about me was, when conflict comes up, she is so good. That is the reputation that I wanted. And so that really helped me then work backwards and say, if that's how I want to be thought of at this company, what does that mean for the standards that I have to hold myself to when there is conflict in the room? And of course, I have to hold myself to those standards regardless of what emotions I am feeling. And I had this moment in my corporate career where I realized that there were certain people who couldn't meet those standards, who would be overwhelmed by the conflict, who would deepen the conflict. And I started to realize that I was getting pulled into things because I started to become the only person that could work with this difficult stakeholder or the only person that could handle this frustrating thing. And then I started to become really valuable. And I know this sounds weird, but a lot of people didn't want to deal with certain hard things or certain difficult people. And then they became really dependent on me to deal with it. And that gave me leverage, right? That made me very valuable to them and very valuable to the organization. And to me, that was so worth it, right? I was like, I'm willing to feel frustrated. I'm willing for this to take 17 touch points with this stakeholder. I'm willing for all those things to happen, because if no one else is willing to do that, and then I'm the only one that can get this project off the line, then you all have to make sure to keep me in this company. Otherwise, you're going to have to do it and you don't want to do it. And I'm totally willing to do it. And it really got me into a good situation where I was not only getting promoted, but this was around the time where I got a big retention bonus. And my company was like, we really want to make sure you stay. So we're giving you this fun extra bonus. And that's really when I realized that I had a lot of leverage in the organization, that I had a really strong reputation. And so I kind of then started to negotiate more things for myself. And I asked for a promotion, and that helped me get my promotion to director. And I also asked for relocation, and my company let me relocate and paid for me to move to where I actually wanted to live at the time. And so I know it's not the most glamorous thing to be I'm really good at emotional regulation. I can deal with annoying stakeholders and not get frustrated. Give me the most frustrating, annoying thing. But it's really just important to think about what might differentiate you and how you want to differentiate yourself. And I'm going to be really honest with you. When I was in my corporate career, I did not want to differentiate myself through hard work and through hours worked. I did not want the reputation of someone who's just going to crank it out, because that reputation usually leads you to just get more and more and more work. And I found that it's much harder to grow into executive leadership when that's your reputation. So I wanted to have a reputation that would get me to executive leadership in a way that I wanted to get there and in a way that I felt actually reflected my superpowers and strengths. And the superpowers and strengths that I wanted to get me there were my really solid interpersonal skills, which fits in with this. I wanted to be the person who could handle any difficult stakeholder dynamic. And then unrelated, but related to the overall mission of my show, my executive communication skills and my ability to communicate with executives in a way that helped them make really powerful decisions. So anyway, that's number 4 on the list, which is defining your standards as a leader and sticking with those standards even when you're feeling an uncomfortable emotion that makes it hard to do that. Okay, the final thing on the list, this is such a beautiful one. The final way to get better at emotional regulation is to set what I call resilience goals instead of setting perfectionist goals for the person that you want to become. So let me explain the difference between a resilience goal and a perfectionist goal. A perfectionist goal is a goal that we set for ourselves that is rooted in perfectionism. It's often rooted in a view of ourselves and the world that isn't actually based in reality. So an example of a perfectionist goal would be, I want to be a leader who never gets overwhelmed. I want to be a leader who never gets angry. I want to be a leader who never blank. If we are saying, I want to be someone who never blank, and we fill in the blank with something that is a normal part of the human experience, this is a perfectionist goal. We're basically trying to create our success by avoiding anything hard, by being a perfect robot who never encounters difficult emotions. This is unrealistic, and it's especially unrealistic if you're ambitious and if you're in a leadership position and if you're someone who likes to challenge yourself. It's very unrealistic to be like, I'm super ambitious and I want to challenge myself, but I also want to be someone who's never overwhelmed and never feels like things are hard, right? Like those things are at odds with one another. And yet sometimes in our minds, we don't realize that. And we have these conflicting goals where we're like, I want to achieve big things and take up space and be bigger, but I never want to feel uncomfortable. I never want to feel blank. And this can get us stuck because those things don't go together. If we're going to take up space and do big things, it's not always going to feel good. And that's okay. And that is why I think resilience goals are so much better than perfectionist goals. So perfectionist goals are about never struggling and never feeling uncomfortable. Resilience goals are goals around becoming a version of you who can handle those things. A version of you who can get the job done even if it's overwhelming. A version of you who can deliver what you need to deliver even if you feel nervous, even if it feels difficult. A resilience goal is about your ability to show up and do what you need to do, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it's hard for you, even if you're experiencing difficult emotions. When we set resilience goals and we focus on becoming the version of us who can handle difficult feelings, as opposed to trying to become a version of us who never feels difficult feelings, then we tend to start making choices that bring up difficult feelings. But in making those choices, we feel motivated to move through the difficult feelings because part of our goal is resilience. Part of our goal is to get better at the things that are difficult emotionally. So it's sort of like if you want to get really strong, it would be really difficult to be like, I want to get really strong, but I never want sore muscles, right? And I mean, look, that'd be great. Like sore muscles suck. It feels really bad when your whole body is sore. But if you want to get strong, you're going to have to be sore. So it would be much wiser for you to say something like, okay, I want to get strong and I want to also become the version of myself who doesn't give up and stop going to the gym just because she's feeling sore. Do you see the difference there? How, yes, it's easier to like never feel sore, but if you set that as your goal, you're not going to achieve your bigger goal, which is to become stronger. So when you decide, okay, I want to become resilient, I want to become the person who keeps going even when my muscles are sore, that sets you up to not give up when the soreness happens. Similarly, in a professional setting, if you say, I want to be the person who can handle the feelings, handle the overwhelm, handle the anxiety, handle the challenge, then that sets you up to move through it when it comes up versus to be like, oh, this feels so bad. I have to make this feeling go away. I have to stop. Instead, you're like, this is my chance to become the badass, resilient version of me that I want to become. And personally, to me, there's like nothing that gets me more excited than thinking about becoming a version of me that can handle any feeling, that can handle any discomfort, that can handle any emotion. Because I know the more that I become that, the more unstoppable I become. So yeah, is it challenging to experience difficult emotions? Of course. Would it be less challenging to never experience discomfort or difficult emotions? Yeah, also of course. But do I want to become the version of me who just avoids everything hard? Or do I want to become the version of me who gets really good at hard things? For me, it's the latter. That's what I want. And so when I focus on that, it helps me feel motivated to get good at emotional regulation and to say to myself, okay, this situation is really hard. But also, if I can move through this hard situation, that's just another opportunity to show myself how good I am at this and to become the version of me who can handle anything. So I'll recap the 5 things really quickly. 5 ways to get better at emotional regulation. Number 1, develop a deeper awareness of what emotions you are feeling. Number 2, get better at not judging yourself when you're experiencing a difficult emotion. Number 3, get better at not judging other people when you're experiencing a difficult emotion. Number 4, have clearly defined standards for how you show up as a leader and try to meet those standards no matter what emotion you're feeling. And number 5, set resilience goals that are around you becoming more resilient versus perfectionist goals that are focused on you never encountering any sort of adversity. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. This turned out so much longer than I thought, but I'm so glad that you made it to the end. Thank you for sticking with me. And if you want to build strong emotional regulation capacity and you want to build that internal strength that helps you be able to handle challenging situations and that makes you feel like you can handle a bigger leadership role, come work with me and I will help you build that. You can add yourself to the waitlist for my program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy, and you will be first to find out when I open doors so you can apply for the program and work with me for 6 months to build resilience, become unstoppably confident, and develop a powerful voice at work. Thank you so much for being here, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye!